Hello and welcome back. My name is Gabriel Bradford. I'm a Lite Leaders Youth podcast host, and we are very, very excited to welcome Dr. J to the podcast. How you feeling today, Dr. J?
I'm pretty good. It's kind of late in the evening, so I'm excited, but I'm also tired. But I'm more excited than
Yeah,
tired.
I
Thank you for
I, I totally understand that. It's all long days, right? But it's
asking.
it's motivated, we're disciplined, so put in the work.
Yeah.
I thank you so much again for coming here tonight and being willing to share your evening with us. Tell us what's all the different things you do. We were looking at your bio, and you're a restorative justice practitioner, global leader, and a lot of just a lot of different things you've done with your career. So tell us about yourself.
Um, so from a personal perspective, I'm love personified because I know usually when we start the conversation about who we are, we typically tell people what we do, and that's not answering the question of who we are. So who I am, I'm love personified. What I do, I am a 10-time author, preparing for my 11th and 12th book to drop March 3rd. Um, I am a mother of 5 biological children, 5 additional children brought by love. I am a paw baby mom, like my dog Rosie is literally right here over here on my ottoman close to me. Um, I'm happily married, and we'll talk about that in a second too. Because I've had some challenges lately in
Oh
this
yeah.
season of my life that has brought on a lot of grief, but at the same time, still being able to find the strength in terms of the work that I do, because it's my calling. This is not work, this is my assignment. Outside of that, professionally, I'm a college professor. I'm a restorative justice practitioner, meaning that I have so many years of experience and expertise and the college background, the degrees, all those beautiful things and the accolades that support the work that I do in terms of walking away from punitive forms of discipline and
Mhm.
really honing in on what it means to heal holistically and walk away from those adverse childhood experiences, not in terms of forgetting about what happened to you, but more about being able to live a life that's based on what the possibilities are when you learn to heal and stay on that healing journey. It's not something that you just pick up and put down. It's like once you start the healing journey, stay
Yeah.
on the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm appreciative because I've done some work with MacArthur Foundation as it relates to what does restorative justice mean in the workplace in terms of workplace trauma and ostracism. I've done a lot of work with schools across the nation, building out different programs and helping them understand that restorative justice isn't a program, it's a way of life. But if you want to bring on programs that have a restorative lens
Yeah.
that walks away from dehumanizing our children, then this is what it can look like. And I can go on and on. But this is the work I do.
Yeah, it sounds like there's so much you do, and I think we'll definitely explore more of these topics. We want to first get to know you a little bit more, and so tell us, what was it like growing up? Were you live in Chicago, or where do you grow up?
I grew up in the south suburb of Chicago, Harvey,
Okay.
Illinois. I'm Harvey World all day long, zip code 60426. I'm a preacher's kid, so I know what it's like to
Okay.
grow up in church and still try to find who you are outside of your parents, because my mother was a minister. And so,
Okay.
if you ever heard about being a preacher's kid, it all depends on what you heard. I might say I lived up to it.
Dude.
I was at the age of 15, became very rebellious. I lived a life in hell from age 15 to 26. And so I know like part of the conversation may even be about stalker awareness. And so that portion of my life happened in those 11 years when I lost my way. But I found my way again. So I'm a believer. I believe in God. I don't believe in religion. I do believe in my spirituality. And I believe it's my faith that's keeping me going.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit more about, yeah, what was it like being a preacher's kid? I know we've heard some of the stories of, it's like I always imagine like hearing about the preacher's kids. They're always rebellious, and like they're like that you got the preachers like very very focused and zeroed in like that straight and narrow, and then you have their kids who go go kind of astray, if you will. What
Yeah.
was that like? Was it was it like
So
that for you, or?
from from I want to say from conception, or even before I knew I was going to be who I was going to be, God knew. So from that time to the thought of me until the age of 15, I was probably the perfect kid. Like I knew I could quote every scripture, even the enemy knew how to quote scriptures. I used to sing for my mom, I used to sing in the church, I used to sing for my bishop. If you know anything about Church of God in Christ, very strict at that particular time. You couldn't wear only wear Carmex. I had to wear skirts down to my ankles.
Oh,
I went to church 6 days a week. Even to the point when I started going way crazy, I would lie and say I was going to the city, Chicago, to hang with my friends. In actuality, I was going to church. Yeah, so it was very interesting growing up. I saw a lot of different things that I'm able to put into perspective as an adult that I couldn't put into perspective as a child. And some of the struggles I had was I'm a visual learner, and we don't talk about our youth learning styles until they probably get to college, if they explore what college looks like, or even adulthood when they get into those work environments where it's like something's not catching, and it's not catching because what I'm saying to you, I think I'm comprehending a message that's clear, but you're not getting it because you need to see what I'm saying. I need to be able to model the way. And so I'm a visual learner. And so one of my struggles growing up was that my mother always taught me to be an upstanding student. So if there was ever a time where a teacher asked a question I didn't understand, what you do? You raise your hand and you ask the question, even if it makes you uncomfortable. But then I take that same situation and apply it to when I'm in the house of the Lord, right? Or if I'm in
right.
church or whatever sacred place where people come together to worship God. I asked the question and it seemed as a form of disrespect. So I was confused because I'm like, well, my mother taught me to ask these questions, but then when I ask questions at school, it's cool, but when I ask questions at church, it's not. And so now I'm seeing that this rebel child is being disrespectful, so I wouldn't get quiet. And so the unfortunate side about, when we talk about youth and youth development and helping them find their voice, oftentimes they find their voice in the most egregious ways, because when they try to use their voice, it's seen as a form of disrespect. And then they learn to not effectively use their voice. And when they
Yeah.
do use it, it's the most angriest way. So yeah, that sums up a portion of what that looked like being a preacher's kid. And even when I went to my mom and told her, like, I'm young, I'm cute, the boys are starting to recognize me in ways that they didn't recognize me before. I went from being a nerd to like, oh my God, that's Shaniqua, right? And she would tell me to quote scriptures. These boys, not one scripture I had to say. So the streets won. The streets won for a prolonged period of time in my life. Where the church, they were still praying for me, but I did lose my way.
Hmm. So I think it's interesting you talk about yeah, about that part where in school you're supposed to ask those questions, but then in church or other situations it's seen as a form of disrespect. And I know I've come across that a little bit when I was growing up. I'd ask questions or just ask why something was the way it was. People were like, well, it's the way it is, and I'm like, whoa, we can change the world. This is we're meant to change. That's part of each of our journeys. And I think even a part of that in religion is change, and it's a process. Like you don't become like you don't become saved in one night. It's a continual process and
Yeah.
journey. So I think that's really interesting you bring that up. Is that something that your kids have had to deal with in their lives? Like, because I know even like 5 years ago, like I've still come across people who are like that. Is that an issue they're still facing, you feel?
It's not as prominent as it was when I was growing up. Like, things are not necessarily lenient, but it's definitely more liberating in terms of helping people find their voice, because the way the world is now, with social media, there's so many different barriers that have been created that our youth are, not able to navigate in a way that allows them to live. They stay in survival mode. What I've seen in many spaces where we talk about religion and or spirituality has really like set the tone for like not necessarily come as you are per se, even though they say that's the case, but more about being able to really hone in on what the world is experiencing in that moment, and not necessarily just talk about the Bible and the King James version. Like, let's place your name instead of saying thee, thou, thou, or thus. Let's say Shaniqua has been called to do X, Y, and Z. Like, make it very applicable and have this life application perspective that it is not necessarily all the way acceptable, but well more understood.
Yeah, I think that that's really important to see, especially in today's world where so much of the time I feel like we've had a hard time placing ourselves in like other positions. Like it's so hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes. But then when you put yourself in the position where it's like you feel like they're talking to you, it's so much more like direct. And so that's really interesting you bring that up. I know we've had a lot of conversations with different people that about that, so I think that's really really important. So tell us, you said up to 15 you were like the perfect like preacher's child, and then you said
Outside.
you kind of you went away. Tell us about that journey. And
Mm. So one shameless plug, buy the book, my very first self-published book, 12, A Memoir to My Younger Self, really channels and I share this narrative about what I experienced from the time I can recall, growing up until I received my doctorate degree in 2016. So you don't want to know anything about my life and my journey. What I did was, the reason why the book is called 12 is because my memory goes by location. So there's 12 prominent locations in my life that some of the greatest of things happen and some of the worst of things happen. And so
okay.
some of the things in terms of when I turned 15, like I fell in love with this guy who was a drug dealer in the neighborhood. It was like the craziest but perfect love story, the church girl with the drug dealer. Oh, wow. And so I kind of lost my way. My mom at that particular time, her health was failing, but her faith was even stronger than it has ever been. And so one of the things, and she passed recently, she passed September 2nd, 2022. So a lot of the work that I do is really because she's everywhere. Everything I do, everything I am, my gestures, my posture, my tone, it's all her. So and so when I think about it, I was rebellious because I was so lost. I was so hurt. I, didn't even understand what adverse childhood experiences consist of until I got older in life. And a lot of times you don't know you're in any form of dysfunction until you are exposed to something outside of your norm. And so when I got to high school, which was still predominantly white, I didn't realize how poor we were, because in my community, everybody thought we were doing pretty good. But then I get into a different environment where I was exposed to different conversation, a different culture, different language, different experiences, and I started to feel some kind of way. And so when I realized that we weren't necessarily rich, but we actually were poverty stricken, I didn't want to feel that. I didn't want to experience that. And I didn't want the shame and guilt that was associated to poverty. So me getting with this drug dealer, yes, he was cute at that particular time. Yes, he had the fancy vehicles, everything that I, just on the physique of the materialistics of everything was on. And so you talking about, like, you think about the box Chevys with the rims and the sounds that shake the block. That's what I was attracted to. And so I got with him, and he was able to support the things that my mother couldn't support, financially, maybe even necessarily emotionally to a certain extent. And so I had my first child at 17, who can hear what I'm saying right now. She's 24, she'll be 25 this year. That's my heart. They all my heart. Come out your firstborn. I had her at 17, and I had my second child at 19. And right after that, it really took a turn for the worse, because we don't talk about postpartum depression. We don't talk about teen pregnancy, and I was ostracized from my church. So this place that I called home, ostracized me because I was seen as a leper. And what I mean by that is I was seen as being tainted. I'm no longer a virgin. I'm no longer, pure. And even though there was things, it's one thing to do things behind closed doors and no one knows about it. So I'm seen as the perfect angel. But then when I show up pregnant, obviously somewhere along the line, I was doing something that was sinful. And
Mm,
so
yeah.
I lost that foundation. Well, I lost the idea what that foundation looked like because I was ostracized. And so I was really lost because I turned my back, not just on the people who said they believe in God, I turned my back on God. And that's a whole nother conversation because a lot of times what happens is we take God to be people when actually God is beyond the scope of the people that we
Oh,
interact
yeah.
with. And so it was rough. I ended up getting into a very abusive relationship after being with the young man I spoke of earlier that I had my first two children with. And when I got with this young man who on the outside looked perfect, I did not know he was addicted to drugs because in my mind, when someone's addicted to drugs, they look a certain way. They look depleted, they look poor, like we gotta be totally honest. We might even have certain names for them depending on what neighborhood you come from, like crackheads or hypes. Like if you're gonna be candid, you gotta
Yeah.
tell the truth. He didn't fit that scope and he didn't fit the description. He had all his teeth, you know what I'm saying? He dressed well, he smelled good, he was presentable, he knew how to hold a conversation, he was very intellectual, but I also met his representative. I didn't meet the real him. I met the person he wanted me to meet until he reeled me in. And then I found myself in a situation that I felt like I couldn't get out of. And so, yeah, like, and
Yeah.
then life started happening in a way like it was downhill.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like that. So, and again, we'll touch on that because I do want to get to that. But tell us, what was it like being a teen mom? I know that's something that is not often talked about. I think enough. I know it's I've heard a lot of stories, from people, and what was it like being a teen mom? Can you tell us about that?
Uh, for me, it was rough because the idea of having a child was all fine and dandy because in my mind I'm grown until I had her. And that first night was okay, but the night after that, it was on. She cried. Every time she cried, I cried.
Mm.
And mind you, I was 17, so I'm still living under my mom's roof. And a lot of times what happens is young ladies or people who are deemed young women, young ladies, I know, we live in a day and age, you gotta be so careful about, gender roles, but if we're gonna be totally candid, and I'm speaking to her and creates a safe and brave space for us tonight. What happens is these young ladies get pregnant and the idea of them being grown is the only thing they can think of, but you're living under your mother's or your parents' roof. And so you're not grown.
Mm.
So there's this conflict where in your mind, you're doing everything that grown folks do, quote unquote, grown folks do. So
Yeah.
you think you're grown, but you still gotta live by somebody's rules wherever you go. And so there were times where I got put out the house because that's my baby. I'm grown. You can't tell me what to do. I don't need a
Mm.
curfew. I'm out here doing this, that, and the other. And so I find
Uh,
myself in a situation where I gotta go. Um, and then the other part I touched on is mental health and mental illness. We don't talk about postpartum depression, or we don't talk about depression. We don't talk about suicidal ideations. We don't talk about inadequacies. What we talk about is like, girl, you be fine. Smoke, you can smoke it away. Like Solange got a whole song about it. You can drink it away, you can sex it away, but you can't do any of these things. And so when we talk about mental health and mental illness, one of the things I do is normalize the conversations around getting the help that you need. You can, if you believe in God or believe in a higher power or spirituality, religion, that's beautiful, but you can also lay on the couch of a professional. Or now that we live in a day and age of telehealth, get the help that you need. You have to have a safe outlet and someone that can provide the tools, skills, and resources that are needed that's outside of a friend. A friend can only do so much. A friend can tell you like, girl, you'll be fine, just sleep it away. Or the best thing you can do is go from this person to the next person to get over the first person. So we gotta
yeah.
really have those conversations that are needed. So it was rough. It was really rough. And you would think after having that one who gave me a run for my money, that I wouldn't have four more. But I have four
Yeah.
more.
That's amazing. That you recognize that now, like you're able to look back and see like some of the struggles it seems of being a teen mom, and also especially, yeah, the part about you mentioned postnatal depression. Was that something you experienced personally, or?
Yeah, postpartum depression, it was definitely something I experienced, even though I didn't have the terminology to support what I was feeling. And that's another thing, is that a lot of times you feel off, you don't feel balanced, you don't feel right, whatever that it may be. And so if you don't have the right verbiage for it, it's not acknowledged. So I would tell people like, I love her, but I just can't, I don't know how to support her. I don't even know what to do with myself. And it's like, oh, well, that's just part of it. No, just like you said earlier, Gary, like, it's not just, we can't keep using those terms like it is what it is. No, it's not. It's not. And that's why we don't grow, and that's why we don't sustain, and that's why we can't evolve, is because we continuously live by traditional methods that may or may not have ever worked, and just because it was something that was given to us. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's definitely something I experienced. And it really, having my first child and dealing with postpartum depression only heightened when I had my second child. And so when I had my second child, which is my only born son, I have 4 daughters and 1 son, girl, boy, girl, girl, girl. After I had my second child, which is my only born son, I started feeling like I don't want to live anymore. And it went to the extreme of like, I would say it, and because I kept a smile on my face, like I could say, I don't want to live anymore with it. Like, I don't want to live anymore. And because I said it that way, with this type of posture, this type of tone, with a smile on my face, people are like, oh my gosh, you are so crazy.
Yeah.
And then April of 2001, I tried to end it all. So I know what it's like to be in a psychiatric ward. I know what it's like to feel like, I hate to use the word crazy, but in my mind, once I got to the psychiatric ward, I had a conversation with God, like, I thought I was gone. But now I'm around some other people that let me know I can make it. Like, I need out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. But see, it's too late. Now you in this place, and you're deemed unfit to be around, be in other environments. So you need this type of environment to keep you safe and sound, to help you get grounded, to figure out, let's get to the root of like a diagnosis. Let's put you on this medication. Let's help you find a new routine.
Yeah.
It was wild. I mean, I could talk about that. I could write a book about being in a psychiatric ward all by itself. I even tried doing like my own form of stand-up comedy, because that is my way of walking away from being Dr. Jones sometimes. Because once you get these certain titles and credentials and you make a great name for yourself and get a platform, people start to dehumanize you, not in a way that is egregious, but in a way like, oh, she shouldn't say that. Oh my gosh, she talk like that? Like, I'm still human. I still got feelings and emotions too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's hard to, sometimes it can be hard to talk about that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Um I know so tell us a little more about, about that, going back to your one relationship, or the abusive relationship with your parent, it's
That's my ex-husband.
what was that like? How did you like recognize that it was being abusive?
In hindsight, there was nothing cute about isolation, because what would happen is, like, I just want you to myself. I don't, like, I don't want to share you with your family. I don't even want to share you with your other children. I just want to be with you. I just want you to be with me. And that was toxic. When in actuality, at that particular time in my life, I was like, oh my God, he loves me so much. And because I had started to gain weight and started to feel very insecure, I didn't feel like, in terms of what society would say is appropriate for balance in terms of physique and materialistic, the outside, the surface, I didn't think I was good enough for him. So for him to want to be with me was amazing. And so I took the toxic, language, I took those undertones that, you're like, oh my God, that was abusive all along, or him pulling off on me because I didn't come out the store fast enough, or if I stayed at a friend's house too long, he's calling my phone, blowing me up. And I'm like, oh my God, he is so annoying, but it's so cute. No, there's nothing cute about it. And so those were like some of the subtle things that were happening in my life. And then I started recognizing things were going missing around the house. And keep in mind, I already had 2 children when I met him. And I got pregnant with my 3rd child. We got married. I met him in 2003.
Okay.
April, spring of 2003. I was married to him by fall 2003 and gave birth to our 1st child, my 3rd, his 1st, January 2004. So in less than a year, I was married to him and working on my 3rd child. And it was right after I had my 3rd child that I realized that some of the conversations and some of the situations and circumstances that were happening prior to me giving birth to our 1st child together, that it was toxic, but I was already in it. And in my mind, I have these 3 children now. And I'm married. That's my husband. I'm Shaniqua from Harvey. I'm he fine, he look good. I'm doing pretty good for myself on the outside looking in. My babies look nice. I work at the bank. We good. But behind closed doors, what was happening is he started to hit me. And I can recall one time, how you thinking about something that happened earlier in the day and you laugh to yourself. And even though it is seemed like a little, like if the 3 of us are together and we friends and I laugh out loud and we're in the midst of a conversation, naturally you're gonna ask like, what's so funny?
Yeah.
But because of if we have this meaningful relationship that is positive and that is functional, you're not gonna press me to answer the question. But in dysfunctional situations, I was laughing and he said, what's so funny? And I was cooking and I was like, oh, nothing. And I couldn't even really think like fast enough how to answer the question. And so he hit me while I was cooking. And what he did was not just hit me with his hand, he took a hammer to my pinky finger while I was cooking.
Oh.
And so like my finger's crooked for life, right? And I walked off, because mind you, 3 children sitting at the table. I walked out the kitchen, cried in the bathroom, tried to make a little homemade stent to hold my finger together, and then came back and finished cooking. And that night, he cuddled up. I'm so sorry, I lost it. And he kept losing it, and he kept losing it till I lost it. And so what, a lot of times when we talk about abusive relationships, unfortunately, we see abusive relationships as being male dominant, where the male is the one who is the perpetrator or the offender or the person who is attacking another. And in that case, that is how it started. But then once he started to lose weight because of drugs and I started to gain weight, I felt like I was more powerful than he was. And so I started to look forward to fighting, because I thought about all the times he hit me and I didn't hit him back. So I made up in my mind, I'm going to make up for lost time. So I became just as dysfunctional as he was. And in my mind, I conjured up the idea, as long as it's him and I having these physical attacks, that if he's not touching the kids in any form or fashion, I'll keep taking the hits as long as he's not touching these children. And it wasn't until I had a really unfortunate situation when I made up my mind that I wanted to leave after getting pregnant with my 5th child, who is a result of egregious attack. And I made the decision prior to getting pregnant with her that I wanted to leave. And it was the worst type of situation in terms of leaving. That November 22nd, 2006, which was my 26th birthday, I went into labor 3 days prior to my 26th birthday to give my last and final child, and I died on my 26th birthday giving birth. And I had made a promise to myself on that day. That's why I said I lived a life of health from age 15 to 26. And so I know it's like the crossover. Now I don't have no significant story about like I saw my ancestors and I talked to it was dark, it was gloomy. And because of growing up in the church and they say, when you get ready to go home to glory, you see the light, and I saw darkness, I got really scared. Like, I know I'm not about to go to hell.
Yeah.
So I had a come to Jesus moment in the midst of everything that was happening. I couldn't quote scriptures. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you know the routine, you know the right things to say, you know the right things to do when you get into an emergency situation, But when the emergency situation occurs, no matter how much you've prepared for it, there are times, especially like this, where you forget everything that you've been taught to say and do.
Yeah.
So I couldn't think of the sinner's prayer. I couldn't quote scriptures. I couldn't think of anything that my mother gave me as my foundation. And so I just had like a come to Jesus moment, like, God, this is Shaniqua, but I don't want to die. I thought I did. I tried it before. I want to live. I want to thrive. I want to raise my own children. Even this child here that comes from a fortunate circumstance. Let me live. Let me thrive. Let me raise my children. Let me make good on my word. Let me walk into the calling that you saw fit for me. And let me get out of this toxic relationship as soon as I can. And let me do your work. And ever since then, I'm 42 now. It hasn't been easy.
Yeah.
But I'm still here and I'm doing everything God has told me to do.
Well, that's amazing that you were able to, to get out of it and to, rediscover your relationship with God, and also just again get out of that abusive relationship, because it seems like you were in that for a long time. So
It felt like a long time, but in hindsight, I met him in 2003, and even before February of 2006 can come, the relationship was over. It was done. It was just, but it became a situation he wouldn't let me go. So he started stalking me, he started showing everywhere I went, he showed up, to the extent where people didn't even want to be bothered with me. They like, I love you, but you bring too much drama. Like every time you come around, we gotta call the police or we gotta protect you. And people get tired of that and they get worn out. We don't talk about that when it comes to domestic violence situations, that you want to have a village, but a lot of times your village gets worn out from trying to protect you, especially when you
oh
have law enforcement not really living up to the expectations they're supposed to provide in terms of serving and protecting. So it's like the village has to take matters in their own hands, but to what extent?
yeah, that's something that I don't think we've spoken about. How was it with you? Do you have like a good support group when you were leaving that relationship, or how were you supported?
So even though my mother was tired of her daughter, and I'm the only girl and I'm the youngest, she like, out of all of these years I raised these children, which are boys, my girl is the one that gave me a run for my money. But my mother always prayed for me, even when we weren't on the best of terms. And then outside of that, I that's how I met my husband that I'm married to now. He became my protector, and he was my friend. It was, no strings attached. It was just like God just placed him in my life at the right time. Just like, you need a real friend. You don't need someone that's going to talk about you behind your back. You don't need someone who is going to belittle you or make you feel less than you already feel. You need someone that's going to strengthen you. You need someone that's going to give you the real support that you need, especially when it comes to your children. And so to meet a man that care about your children, that's not his children, was one of the most rewarding experiences that helped me even love him even more. Not just as my friend, but he became my best friend and my lover and my companion and my travel buddy. And so, yeah, he was my biggest support. And because he is a strong man, that led my ex-husband to leave me alone.
That's honestly amazing that like he was just there for you to help you, and then and now you say you're both married.
Yeah, we're married. We've been married 12 years, it'll be 13 years. We've been together 15, 16 years, and it'll be 13 years that we've been married. That's how that goes. I
Wow.
met him in 2006. We got married in 2012. So yeah, it'll be 11 years this year. And if I gotta say something real quick, I told you my mom passed September 2nd, and then 26 days later, my husband had a massive heart attack.
Oh
And
no.
and he was deemed brain dead, and according to medical records, said he went without oxygen close to 40 minutes. And then it got to a point where they told me that I needed to make end of life plans. And so when I talk about this work that I do in terms of restorative justice, when I talk about the calling that God has on my life, it is not easy. It'd be easier to just go crawl under a rock. But I stand on the word of God, I stand on his faith, and because I know this man and I've built a relationship and a world with him, I knew that the doctors were saying one thing, but I knew my faith was telling me something different. And so he came home January 11th. He still, the journey is long, have to build up those motor skills again. And it's almost like having a child, but he can comprehend everything they say. He said, they told me he was brain dead. They told me he would never have a quality, there's no quality of life there, that I should just pull the plug. And I'm glad I didn't. And so he's home, and that's what faith is. That's what advocacy, that's what real love is about. We got to make sure we have those conversations, those tough conversations. We can't just talk about the celebratory. We can't just talk about, taking the next trip or retirement. We have to talk about, if for any reason, unfortunately, these circumstances occur, what would you have me to do? And
Yeah.
so I'm just glad I had the mental capacity to make the right decision. So he's home, and he probably can even hear my voice as we talk.
Well, that's amazing. I can tell, like, just from hearing your story and hearing you talk about him, I can tell that you both really love each other and are having those conversations. And so I think that's really beautiful, and a great example to, all of our viewers to, take time to, to look at different examples of people who are doing what Dr. J is doing.
Yep.
And so I know we have a little bit more time. I want to cover so you mentioned your 10, you have 10 books right now. So
Yeah.
far that have been published. Tell us
Yeah.
about that. That's really impressive. I think very few people I've met, and I've met many people in my line of work, but very few people I met have achieved something that big, publishing 10 books. Tell us, how did you become an author, and you especially have 10 books? That's amazing.
So the first two I co-authored with about entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur within, and then a gentleman approached me about talking about our trials and tribulations as entrepreneurs, giving some key points. And so those were my first two books. But then after that, I kind of hit the ground running. Like, I see what this publishing process can really look like. And I don't necessarily see representation of what I've experienced. Like we have some of the greatest to ever do it in terms of poets, in terms of other authors that we've heard of. But when we talk about like modern day situations that people can relate to in the here and now, I didn't necessarily see it in a way that will allow people to want to read, feel compelled to share their stories. I live my life by the mantra, journey not shared is a soul not healed. And I actually wrote my book while I was in my doctoral program, and that was my outlet. So a lot of times when you are in the world of academia, everything has to look a certain way. You have to do it in APA style. You have to have your references. You have to have, all these different things. And I could go on and on about what the doctoral process, because that felt like a basic process. So me writing my book was that way of my outlet of what I experienced from the time I can remember to that current day when I walk across stage, receiving the highest degree this world has to offer. And so after I wrote that book in 2016, I started writing books that kind of talked about not just like the first book was about the personal side of me, but then I started talking about the profession. Like, what is restorative justice? Let me give you a training manual, something that is easy read to help you better understand what restorative justice is. So when I do come in to speak, or when I do come in to train, I have something that is a tangible tool that you can use to stay with you so that you can apply it in ways that is conducive to meet the needs of your needs as well as the needs of the people you serve. And most times are their schools. And then from there, I just started writing journals, things that I journal about. I created, I love Canva. So a lot of these things people think it's impossible, but if you just look at what you have around you and how can you monetize it, especially in the midst of the pandemic. One of the things I've been able to do, like right now, I'm in the process of finishing up 2 books that come out next month, but I'm also writing an ebook about Black women as home, because we talk about home ownership in terms of like your credit score need to be a certain amount, you need to have a certain amount put aside, don't make any big ticket purchases, you need to have X, Y, and Z, and you need to have this checklist. But then we don't talk about the aftermath of becoming a homeowner. So one of the things I'm working on right now is like what I've experienced, that even though I'm married and even though my husband is in a situation he's in right now, life is still life and things are still happening. And so what does it mean when you have a mortgage that's tied to an escrow account? What does it mean to have homeowners insurance? What does it mean to have a home warranty plan? So when something goes wrong, or when appliance, is not necessarily working properly, So how do you save money, or how do you know, how do you sustain, how do you keep this house? Because we talk about getting it, but we don't talk about keeping it. Same thing with relationships. We talk about, all these guys being in these different relationships, and they don't have to be the romantic relationship. We talk about friendships, interpersonal relationships. And so my work is really about relationship building.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
amazing you talk about the relationships because I know in Adriana's line of work as well as mine, we both it's all based on relationships. So we meet people from all over the world, all over the country, all over the state, and it's pretty crazy to see how the our common denominator is building friendships, building relationships. And like you said, it's not just, a relation like a romantic relationship. It can just be a friend's relationship. It can be a business relationship. And that's where it seems like, I mean, you've had great success in that. I mean, as receiving your doctorate, which is honestly so amazing. I mean, that's one of the highest honors and degrees you can have in education, and so that's genuinely amazing. And for 10 books, going on 12. So I feel like we've covered a lot in this interview. We talked about your background and some of the stuff you're doing. Tell us about what we can expect for the future. I know you're sharing with us about your book signing. Tell us more.
So I just got news, and this is like a historical moment, so I'm actually sharing it before we even have the flyer prepared. But a lot of times, and I think Adriana has shared this earlier about a college tour. And so usually when we talk about college tours, it's talking about taking youth to, those who are in high school preparing for the college experience. We're taking them on college tours, but the work that I do is not just tied to the youth, it's tied to the people who's tied to the youth, which are their families. And so the historical moment is that my organization, Purple Path, is joining forces with Governor State University located in University Park, Illinois, where I graduated from. And we're partnering to provide an instant decision day, February 27th. So what I'm doing is I'm taking people from the place I grew up in, Harvey, Illinois, and working with Harvey School District 152, along with their parents. Any parent that has, the ideal aspiration to achieve an undergraduate degree, making sure your application fee is waived. We're gonna make sure that you have your official transcripts and you get your decision that day. You're gonna do a college tour, you're gonna look at the dorms, you're gonna sit in the classroom, you're gonna be a part of a student and a counselor panel discussion. And so it's gonna be a wealth of information that's provided that day, but the end result is helping people understand too that for me, where I come from, we don't talk about education enough. If we do talk about education, it's really just K-12. We don't talk about what education will probably look like and do for you in terms of being able to thrive and be a professional and have a great global platform. I'm that girl that come from the same place you come from. And so not only do your child have the opportunity to achieve their academic goals, you can too. And a lot of times as parents, we put our goals and our aspirations on the back burner to raise families. And then there are times where parents present the children that they help raise because their children thrive and they feel like they're left behind. So how can I help parents not be in a predicament where they feel like they're left behind to find a balance to support your child, but in order to support your child effectively, you have to support yourself first.
Yep. That's honestly amazing hearing about that. And we're so excited for that. So stay tuned for more information. We'll make sure to share that out in our networks. I know you did mention you had a book signing on March 3rd. Where can
March
people
3rd.
find more information about that? And tell us about the books. I know it's Redemption and Restoration.
Yeah, so March 3rd, which will have been my mom's 83rd birthday, is the day of our book launch. It's going to be a Sip and Savor. If you know anything about Sip and Savor, is a Black-owned Trezpew. God bless him and thank him for this opportunity. It will be at his organization, at his coffee shop, March 3rd from 4 to 8 p.m. You can find more information at my website at www.purplepathbydrj.com. A wealth of information is there, not just about events that we're having, but my books, affirmation cards, different, I'm an accountability coach, so we have an accountability coaching program, restorative justice trainings, majority of them are offered. The beginning is offered for free to have like a conversation about what an introduction to restorative justice is all about. So we do a lot of partnerships and collaborations here in the city of Chicago. And then Yeah, so restoration and redemption. Restoration is dedicated to my mom. Because God allowed us to restore our relationship. You know, a lot of times when we talk about things that we do, we don't think about how it affects and impact the lives of those who are in close proximity to us, such as our parents. And so I'm so appreciative from 2018 to the day my mom passed. I was able to make good on my work. Everything that she prayed for and prayed about and saw in me. And you know, our parents know us. She knew I always had it. I just was doing everything but that. Because of being a rebel. And so being able to hear her say how proud she is of me, being able to hear her give me accolades because she could hear me on the call with a team from Nigeria and India at 4 a.m. in the morning because of the time difference, and her like, oh my gosh, this is my boy. Right. And so she like, man, everything I ever prayed for and about, you've exceeded my prayers. And so I'm grateful for that. So this book is really like a devotion in terms of scriptures that she taught me, that has stayed with me and carried me to where I am now. Is to her. So that's restoration. Redemption, my husband, he tattooed up, right? I got
Yeah.
tattoos everywhere. That's neither here nor there, but and I'm very unorthodox and even been seen as an anomaly, but he has a tattoo on his chest, redemption. And so when he had this massive heart attack, we were in our bedroom, and that was the day I stayed home. He asked me to stay home with him, and I'm glad I stayed, because had I not stayed, we would be telling a different story. And so he has this massive heart attack. And I remember when the EMTs came in the room and had to cut his shirt open, the first thing I saw on his chest was redemption. And in my mind, that even though it seemed very grim, that was God's way of telling me, like, he will be redeemed. He will be a new man. He will be a new creature. So I know you want to see the promise, but you got to go through this process.
That,
So redemption is dedicated to him. And I just started a podcast called Restoration and Redemption that started January 6th of this year. I launched it to kind of set the tone for having these kind of conversations that we're having now. So all that information can be found on my website at purplepath.drj.com.
that's amazing. So the podcast, we didn't even cover that. So you just started this podcast on almost 2 weeks ago. Wow. Well, congratulations to that. And thank you again so much for sharing your evening with us. And for our listeners, stay tuned for more information and more amazing podcasts with people like Dr. J. And again, we will be sharing all the information in the video description. So make sure to check out the links and read Redemption and Restoration.